Hello and welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by Osceola editor Bob Ferrante. Bob, this is one of the more difficult shows we would have done since we started this endeavor some 5 years ago when Jerry and you and I started the Osceola over in 2019. So there's no easy way to talk about it. I don't even know how to lead into it, but clearly we want to talk about it. We want to pass on our thoughts and prayers to the victims, both the two that are deceased and obviously the 4 that are recovering from the shooting that happened on Florida State's campus Thursday afternoon. This one, I don't know why it is, Bob, but this is not the first shooting we've had on campus since I got back. But I think this one for some reason struck a little bit closer to home, I guess, because I've been on campus more over the last 5 years than before the previous one and spend so much time there. And then, of course, when you find out, I can't say that I knew Robert Morales, but certainly once I saw his picture, I had seen him around town, and to find out that he was a former walk-on at Florida State when my father coached here. So it actually, I think that probably one of the reasons for a lot of us associated with the university that have a past with the university, it kind of struck a little bit closer to home. But he leaves behind a wife and a daughter. Tiro Chaba, who works for, I believe, Aramark, was in town calling on FSU, and he was killed too in the tragic shooting, and he leaves behind a wife and 2 children. There were 6 more victims, 5 from gunshot wounds, and 1 I read this morning from a fall. I believe 3 have been released from the hospital out of the 5 gunshot victims. But, just a tragic day, and one that I don't think any of us that love Florida State will forget for a long, long time, and probably take some people a while to get over. But we certainly want to start the show by passing on our thoughts and prayers to the Morales family, the Chaba family. Obviously, you cannot words fall short in these kind of things, Bob. But it was a strange day on Thursday, an even stranger weekend, and our hearts and prayer just go out to those families. And listen, it's times like these that, as I sat around this weekend with friends of mine that either the connections were Tallahassee or Florida State, it reminds me why I love being a Florida State graduate. It has more to do with the university as a whole than it does any one sports program. And obviously football was the vehicle that brought my family to Tallahassee. But, I ran into a lot of Seminoles on Friday night and Saturday in the afternoon. And, it was a sad Easter weekend in Tallahassee, and our hearts are out to these people. Our prayers and thoughts are out to these families, and just your thoughts on what transpired and where we go from here.
Thursday was probably one of the more miserable days I think we've had, just seeing the pain that the Florida State community had suffered and endured, and you saw the pain. I went to the press conference on Thursday, and you could see President McCullough, who had just come back from TMH from visiting, some of those victims who were hospitalized, just how much it had weighed on him that deceased students had been impacted. And yeah, I mean, emotionally draining days. I think just what had happened. You have to hope, and I think if we're all trying to find something to hold on to here is the community. The Florida State community is incredibly strong, not just on campus, in the town of Tallahassee, around the world, the people who love Florida State, and that there will be a message of maybe compassion and love that comes out of this for not just those who are lost, but for everyone.
Yeah, and listen, our thanks goes out to the first responders and first aid givers that were there on site, as it, everything was reported pretty much immediately, and kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, minimize the damage that he was able to create on campus on Thursday. But yeah, just an awful day. I was more reactionary than I ever thought I would be. I mean, we hear about these things happening all the time, but as I alluded to, you and I spend a tremendous amount of time on campus, covering a number of things related to Florida State athletics, and it's just, I went to classes in those buildings. I remember seeing one of the pictures of one of the classrooms. I can remember taking one of my last classes in that building that's directly behind a lot of the student union. And yeah, certainly a sad time for Florida State, and a lot of people struggling to wrap their heads around. Not everybody, but going back to campus, and I think that's another thing that just breaks your heart. But I grew up on college campuses, Bob. My father was a college football coach for 52 years, and I was hanging out during the summertime at North Alabama and Delta State and East Tennessee State and Richmond and Memphis and Lamar, and then eventually Florida State, and then attended two schools, Sanford and Florida State. Have worked on multiple campuses. USF, South Carolina, and then obviously with some other jobs, part-time work on campuses for the companies I was representing. And I always felt as safe on any college campus I've ever been on as I do my own home. And that is even true today. And, I'm thinking about going back down to campus this afternoon and walking the dog. I want to go back down to campus. I want to get back on campus as quick as I can, but just because that is a place I've always felt comfortable, Florida State or any other campus, but certainly hope that the folks that are still struggling with that come to terms with it and go back to where they trust being on Florida State's campus or any other college campus for that matter. But I think that was the as it continues to play itself out, I feel bad that people do not feel comfortable back on campus yet. And I hope they find the peace and the resolve to go back on campus, because I think that by and large, campuses are safe places. And it's just, it's another heartbreak. There are no safe places anymore, Bob. I think that's what we're finding out in our country on a bigger scheme. But listen, there's a lot of people in Tallahassee that care about each other because of the Florida State connection. And if you are struggling with this, I hope that you will reach out to talk to somebody, because there's all kind of people with ears that would love to sit down and listen and help you, whoever's struggling with this, start to move beyond it. But sad day in Tallahassee, Bob.
And I don't want to make too much of this, but 6 weeks ago, I was at the Florida State Student Union for the first time, the newly, reworked, renovated, constructed student union, whatever we're calling it. We all remember maybe the long brick horizontal student union that sprawled, and I loved it back in my day, just walking through it. It was not just shade from the hot sun on the hot days, but it was where you'd grab a bagel, or where you would meet friends. And going to that new student union, I think I felt that community, and just seeing students and people hanging out together. It was for a board trustees meeting at the end of February, just to kind of hear what was going on there. But then you saw the various activity going around there, and you kind of felt that Florida State community was there in the new student union. And it's going to be closed for the short term, hopefully not for the long term. Hopefully, we'll be able to kind of make that a community spot again, soon. But tough to, I think it hit home for a lot of us, but it's going to continue to hit home for so many of us for these next few months.
Yeah. Just a terrible day, terrible weekend, and listen, it will hurt for a long time. But I think Florida State is a strong community, as you've mentioned, and my main thoughts are with the victims and their families, and hope that they are have all the strength that they need to get through this, whether it's the families of Mr. Morales or Mr. Chabert or Chaba or the any of the 5 victims that are also shot in this event. But listen, we'll get through this together as a FSU family, but it was a very, very rough weekend. And I know that's a hard way to start a show, and we're glad you're listening or watching, and we appreciate you jumping in. And I don't know, listen, it seems, as I told the guys on Friday when we were thinking about doing a show, it seems trivial to talk about things like the NCAA transfer portal and what may or may not going on with recruiting in various sports. But at some point, you do have to kind of continue to move forward. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back, and Bob and I are going to jump into a little bit about what's going on with the FSU and the football transfer portal, both incoming and outgoing. We've had some news break today, but we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back and talk a little FSU sports here in about 1 minute, if I can get to the right screen. We'll be back in about 51 seconds.
Hey, Seminole fans! Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
All right, we are back with the second half of today's Seminole Sidelines. And Bob, we would have talked about a couple of these things on Friday that happened over in the course of last week, but we are going to jump into where Florida State is in the NCAA transfer portal. Several players are no longer with the program, or at least are looking at their options. And let's go back. We reported Jordan Scott last week, but the receiver room took 2 more hits over the weekend, or over the middle of last week. On Thursday, Hakeem Williams, who we talked about on Wednesday being a potential portal guy, jumped into the portal. Listen, again, Hakeem could end back up on this roster. Stranger things have happened. We've seen kids. There's been a couple kids already in this portal period, not at Florida State, but at other programs. I think David Sanders is probably the most Oklahoma offensive lineman, is probably the biggest one, but he jumped in and jumped out. But Hakeem's in. We talked a little bit about this, Bob. Hakeem is a guy that came in with a ton of potential and maybe even more hype. And quite frankly, just for whatever reason, has not had a chance to live up to it. I think we've talked about this all the time. He is a great kid, always a smile on his face, always a great attitude, always says hello when he's passing by us out at practice. And if there's a kid you want to see succeed at Florida State, Hakeem would have been one of those. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't working here. Now, should he have given it more time and spent a little bit more time with Tim Harris, the new receivers coach? Could he have found his way? But what are your thoughts on Hakeem potentially saying goodbye to the Florida State football program?
Yeah, I think Hakeem's talent has been on display at times here and there, despite the injuries, like the hamstring last fall camp, and then obviously the spring he was injured. We've seen it in glimpses. We've seen little bursts of what he can offer. It's not just that he was a 5-star. It's that, honestly, I think he showed, that first spring that he wasn't ready to play college football, but then he showed through his work ethic that he was willing to put himself in position to compete for more playing time. I think this goes to the bigger picture. We're trying to figure out who's dependable among this receiving core. I think we thought Hakeem might be one of those candidates up there with a Deuce Robinson and a Squirrel White, because if you were building a depth chart, if you're putting 3 wide receivers out there on the field, 11 personnel to start a game, you might say, well, we think Hakeem might be one of those guys. Was he dependable yet? No. Was he a candidate? I think he was among the candidates just because there aren't a lot of really good proven options on this roster right now.
Yeah, and listen, I don't have, for a lot of different reasons, I don't have any much backstory on why Hakeem left. It's certainly from where you would think he would fit into this depth chart. It's disappointing if he was a too deep guy and chose to leave for A, I'm not a starter, or B, the offensive system, because this is a thin room, particularly thin now that he's gone. And we'll talk about Jaylen Brown here in a second. So I do think Hakeem, even if he was not going to be the great player everybody thought he was when he came into this program, I think he had a chance to be a guy that could play in this offense next year, even if it was a backup. Because listen, I've heard multiple times, well, Gus doesn't use that many receivers. Well, that's not true. They use formations to set up the run. They'll use 3 and 4 receiver sets. They're not always going to play 2 receivers. They're not going to line up in the wishbone. This is still a RPO offense, and so they're going to run the ball and they're going to throw the ball out of those same sets. So I think there was a chance for him to be a contributor next year, at least 2 deep. We think Deuce and Squirrel are going to be 2 of the starters, possibly LaWayne McCoy, and then we heard a lot about the next guy we're going to talk about, which is Jaylen Brown, who signed with LSU out of high school. Jaylen was a guy we heard Mike and the coaching staff mention multiple times during spring practice. It certainly sounded like they were going to be a guy that was going to be a guy they were counting on. Then word got that he was going to enter the portal, and then it broke that he had been arrested on Friday night or Thursday night. I can't remember what night it was, but
Saturday morning. Yeah.
Saturday morning. So Friday night, Saturday morning. And Mike showed him the door. He's in the portal. I don't know we don't really know what exactly happened. I got asked the other night, well, if the controlled substance, if the substance in question was marijuana, why would you kick a kid off for marijuana? We don't know what it is. So let's start there. But so I was asked, in your experience, why would a coach make that decision that quickly, right? And I said, and we don't know this, but I was asked a question by a subscriber, so I'm going to address it here. In my experience, that would have been a multiple offender. We don't know if that's the truth, or maybe the charges are a little bit more serious than what we know right now, and the details of the arrest report will be coming out forthcoming. So, but it makes a room that we had questions about the depth of, even that much more dire. Bob, what are your thoughts on Jaylen? And were you surprised how fast it transpired from the time the news broke about the arrest to the time, Mike? Because I don't think we made it to the next morning.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of in that old school Bobby Bowden, you get a second chance and then you're gone type of philosophy. And we didn't really know of a first strike against Jaylen Brown. So, right, I'm kind of with you. We'll find out what the police report, what the incident report says. I think we have the version of Jaylen Brown that we saw in the field last year. Not very consistent, not very good hands. It just wasn't evident. You're going off the potential discussion, what he was in high school as a top 100 type of prospect. Florida State taking a chance on him. It didn't pan out. So again, it kind of goes into that whole, there's a lot of potential in that room, and we're still kind of seeking out who is an option.
Yeah. And listen, Florida State had as any one position that we know about since the portal opened, they seem to be as active in trying to attract wide receivers as any position that as much as of my research has been there. They know they got to replace these guys. I think they had a concern about depth based on what we saw in our one spring scrimmage where Willie Suarez and Elijah Moore were really the 2 kids that stood out when you had a scrimmage where you were without Deuce Robinson, without Squirrel Wright, without Jalen without Luane, right? So, so we knew those four were going to kind of be in the rotations. Deuce and Squirrel, I think we're all projecting starters there. So they have gone in and started looking at some kids. And if you do not follow the Osceola, we do have our Osceola message boards up with our departures and with our potential portal prospects at Florida State may either has interest in or could have interest in. And we know there's at least two receivers that have offers, and that's San Jose State's Trayshawn Hurry. What a great name for a wide receiver. Because Florida State needs him to hurry up and make a decision and hurry up and get on campus if they can get him. But he was at San Jose State last year, 28 catches, 482 yards. And, of course, he has just continued to pick up offers. He's also got Baylor, Miami, USF, Louisville, BYU, and West Virginia. And that was just for those notes are 2 days old, so they could have much more. And then probably the kid that they offered, Keelan Marion from BYU, who had 24 catches for 346 yards, and he's an excellent kickoff returner, average over 26 yards per return this past season for BYU, two of them going back for touchdowns. Now, he has continued to pick up steam over the last 24 hours, and Florida State will be competing with, among others, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Miami, SMU, and Kentucky if they're to try to get a shot at signing Keelan. We'll see what happens there. They offered Illinois State receiver Xavier Lloyd last week, but he has already signed with Missouri, so he is off the potential chart there for wide receivers. But that is the latest I've heard. I've seen multiple reports where they're showing interest in North Carolina receiver Gavin Blackwell. I would be surprised if they go far down that road, and here's why. Mike is looking for production versus potential. We've talked about the shift in their dynamic, particularly in the portal, and Blackwell only has 13 receptions in 15 games over the last 2 years, so he really doesn't fit what we think is the mold for what they're looking for at wide receiver. So we'll see what happens there. Now, we did have a couple of guys break as far as breaking news today entering the portal, and those are defensive end Aaron Hester and offensive lineman TJ Ferguson. Bob Hester did not surprise me. He is a smaller guy for a P4. He's kind of, he's about 5'11", maybe 6 foot at best. He's kind of built like old Syracuse defensive end Dwight Freeney, who played for the Colts, but that'd be his body comp. And listen, he did at times flash last year. He was better as a bull rusher. He had developed a little bit, but my thinking on Aaron Hester, this is probably a good thing for both parties, right? Because I do think he was going to be a depth piece and possibly on the third row of that depth chart, maybe even fourth row, depending on what they're doing on defense, what kind of front. But what are your thoughts on Aaron Hester leaving the program?
Yeah, I think we liked Aaron Hester the few times we talked to him. Obviously, he was sought out by the Jacksonville media for those practices when Florida State was over there. Being a Jacksonville native, obviously, as you mentioned, a legacy. So 10 tackles, he showed it on the field at times that he could be, potentially that rotational guy. I think he probably has seen that he's not in that rotation, whatever position he was being evaluated for, whether it was a true defensive end, whether it was a jack, whether it was something else. I think he's probably not in that body type as a jack. I'm just kind of saying, however he was evaluated, didn't maybe feel to him or the coaching staff that was going to play out. But I'm with you. I think he's got potential to factor in. We've mentioned earlier in the spring, some of these guys could play at a group of 5 school. It's just not playing out like they had originally hoped at a school like Florida State. Yeah.
And then, of course, I don't know. We just got to ask a question on the website, on the outgoing transfer portal thread. Is Ferguson entering the portal a surprise to you guys? So that's the both of us, Bob. No. I would say yes and no, and here's why I say yes. Yes, and that we'd heard Mike talk about him several times this spring, talking about his toughness. And we had not heard Mike talk about him in those terms last year. Uh, and the second reason I'm surprised is because of all the linemen that Florida State had returning from last year's team, not including the guys they brought in the winter transfer portal, Ferguson played the most snaps, fourth most on the entire offense last year, 497 or 37. One of those two numbers is true from scrimmage. So you had a guy that was going to potentially have to battle. He could have battled for one of those two starting guard positions, right? So maybe we're learning one or two things. Maybe you wasn't really in the heat of the battle. And listen, but the reason I'm not surprised is the same reason nobody on here is going to be surprised. He really struggled last year with this football team. So yes and no is the answer for me. What about you? Are you surprised on Ferguson?
I'm operating under the presumption that Adrian Medley, traveling with Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn, is a lock at a guard spot.
Yep.
And that TJ Ferguson would be competing for some amount of playing time. He also knows it's his last year. He doesn't really have the ability to try to develop and hope that he can make some kind of jump in August. Again, I think he falls under the category of a guy who can help somebody out. It's just not Florida State, and it's just not Florida State given that he has 1 year left of eligibility as a redshirt senior. So this goes back to our depth discussion. He would be good to have in the event of injuries, kind of like the Jalen Early discussion too, right? Yeah. It's a guy you'd like to have one of those two. I'd probably rather have Early than Ferguson if I'm just picking one of them, but not having either of them, it just really does thin your depth.
Yeah. Both of those are two. Those are probably your two most experienced backup. I have to go back and confirm that. We did talk a little bit about Early being one of the few guys on this roster returning from last year's team that had a ton of experience. I know there's an entire message board thread on Miami safety Zaquan Patterson. They're potentially being a target for FSU on defense. I do think that FSU would like to bring in another safety for this safety-heavy defense. I think they need to. I think they could upgrade. I don't know that Saquon's that guy because he did not play a lot for Miami last year. I think he played in some games, but only had about 12 total tackles. So probably most of it on special teams. What I am hearing from one source is that FSU is not that interested. Of course, that could change by what happens with other portal prospects. But that one, there's been a significant amount of interest because he did give Florida State a lot of consideration before signing with Miami last year. But we are hearing right now that is likely not to happen. However, we know that this is a very fluid situation, and if they lose, you move up the board. There's a lot of different ways you can move up the board, and one of them is by who they don't get at that same position. So we'll see what happens there. But right now we are, and there's no reported visits from Zaquan that we're aware of. Of course, that could change. But so that is kind of the latest on the portal. I got an email right here. I've been in touch with about 12 NIL agencies today. I'm always worried when my email goes off that I'm missing something. So we will continue to keep you up to date on what's going on with the portal. Obviously, it closes Friday. I wouldn't read too much into players not coming on campus for an official visit because I told Bob earlier today, I think you saw a lot of kids jump in the portal on Wednesday and commit on Thursday. I don't think all those kids went for official visits. I think some of them are finding a roster that suits their position and their chances to play, or an NIL program that fits their pocketbook a little bit better. I think they're making decisions, and a lot of these guys are on their last. A lot of the guys Florida State's looking at anyway are 1 year guys. So I think those guys, I think it's going to be the guys that have 3 or 4 years of eligibility where maybe that official visit means more. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think relative to the number of offers out in the spring versus the winter, you'll see less guys take official visits. But we'll see how that transpires. But that's the latest on the transfer portal. We do have some more positive news in that former FSU Heisman winning trophy quarterback Charlie Ward was officially named the head basketball coach at FAMU today. And Bob, I know you had a chance to listen to what Charlie had to say in his opening presser. There was conversation about Florida State and FAMU getting together on the hardwood in the near future. So what was it's always fun to hear Charlie talk. He's such a positive guy, and I just have such respect for the guy. It's and I'm going to go back and listen to his press conference later. But what did Charlie have to say?
Yeah, I think if we needed some positivity today on a Monday, especially after the events of last week, a guy like Charlie Ward can bring that mindset of the person, and not just the basketball player, but the person. I think it was interesting. I'd forgotten this. Not just his mom and dad, met at Florida A&M, but he was born in the hospital at Florida A&M. So he, him saying, you think of me as a Seminole, but I'm a Rattler. That's my roots. That's where I was born. So a lot of connections throughout Tallahassee here when we talk about Charlie Ward. And a lot of people may not know, if you're far away, coach at Florida High boys basketball for 7 years, won a state title in 2022. Very accomplished as a coach, making that transition from player to coach. But I think we didn't hear again very much about wins or conference titles today. We heard about making the athlete, the person, a better person, making the program better through just player development. I think that's where, let's be honest, I've watched Florida A&M basketball from afar for a very long time. Mike Gillespie was a coach going way back when they made their last NCAA tournament appearance. I think that was 2006 or 2007. So Florida A&M's seen a lot of turnover there. This is not an easy job, but there is a ton of fan support for the right person to bring some energy into this program. And I think Charlie is that guy who's ready to make that long-term commitment. I think he said it twice, Pat, that, this is not a stepping stone type of job for him. This is where he wants to be, in Tallahassee as the Florida A&M coach. This is not him using it as an opportunity to go get a job in the SEC or the Big Ten or whatnot. He's here. He's got some commitments to his family and to things he wants to do. And I think that's the right message that I think the Florida A&M community wants to hear.
Yeah, I think Charlie is one of those guys that is generally into trying to help people. Is not worried about how high his platform is, just that he has a platform. And listen, I think I said it when they hired him. I think it's a win for FAMU, and I think that I can't wait to see what he does over there. I think his name will certainly help them with recruiting and help establish them as a legit basketball program at that level. So I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be fun to see what he does. And I know he and Luke, he mentioned in his press conference that Luke had helped him in some of the transition stuff. He had some questions for Luke. So that was kind of cool to hear that there's kind of an allegiance there between the two, because they're both former FSU basketball players and FSU graduates, and they're starting at the same time. And so hopefully they'll continue to lean on each other. And who knows, maybe we'll see those two programs on the basketball court in the near future. But I'm looking forward to seeing what Charlie does, because I think he might be, I don't know if he's my favorite Seminole, but he's in that one group, 1A through 1Z. He's one of those guys that's tied for first, is the best way to put it. All right, so tomorrow night, Bob, we're going to take the next step in the healing process for Florida State's student body and Florida State alumni. Florida State is going to get back on the baseball field tomorrow night against Stetson. We do have some breaking news on that. That was initially slated for a 6 p.m. start on ACC Network Extra. And I love this decision by ACC Network. They're going to carry this game live nationally. They have bumped up the start time to 5 p.m. And what is going to be, I am sure, an emotionally draining pregame ceremony starting at 4:30 p.m. So if you are planning to attend the game, you do have the schedule there. The game against Stetson on Tuesday night at home for Florida State baseball has been moved up to 5 p.m. with a 4:30 pregame ceremony. And it will be shown live on the ACC Network, not ACC Extra. So if you're listening to us or watching us and you're not in Tallahassee, you will have a chance to see that game. And it's going, listen, sometimes I think this game, Bob, could be cathartic, therapeutic for the FSU community. What are your thoughts on getting back to play?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't think through this possibility that this could become a broadcast that goes from ACC Network Extra out to the ACC Network. I think it's a great decision. Again, to show Florida State fans everywhere that the baseball team is helping to, return the fan base, everybody, the supporters back to athletics. Again, we were supposed to hear from Link Jarrett and Lonnie Alameda on Monday night. That was going to be a 7:00 show that they were going to do, where they'd do it on the radio and do a stream. But I think we can still tell a lot of folks at Florida State are being very cautious in how things kind of come back to athletics, and I don't think they want to take the focus too much away from the events of last week yet.
Yeah.
But I think it will be a great moment for a lot of us to be out there on Tuesday and probably to shed a few tears, but to remember and to enjoy some baseball.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is one of the I don't know how to, obviously I'm always happy to talk about football, but this was a show that you and I talked about this morning. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Have we given it enough time? And I do think that this, we talked about doing it Friday. Would it be therapeutic to get on and talk about Florida State sports for people that are listening or wanting to ask questions, not about the incident, but just, something to take your mind off the incident? We didn't feel like it was proper at that time. Listen, Florida's, sports do have a way of bringing us together in good times and bad times. And it's going to have that opportunity tomorrow night for Florida State fans at the baseball game. We do want to end the show again by just expressing our heartbreak for the Morales family and the Chaba family, both who lost husbands and fathers on campus this past weekend, and for the continued recovery of the 5 victims from gunshot wounds, and obviously the one who hurt themselves falling, trying to get away from what was going on. Listen, our thoughts and prayers are with those folks sincerely, and with the Florida State community as a whole, which I think has got a tremendous amount of support from university leadership and all the first responders and law enforcement that did such a great job, but just a very difficult 5 days for Florida State, and we will continue to try to put one foot in front of the other. And but again, as we said, if you're a person that's struggling with this, please talk to somebody. We know it can be difficult getting past these things, but like I said, I grew up on college campuses. They were one of the safest places I still feel that way, and I cannot wait to get back down to campus and check out the university I love and where my degree is from, and walk the campus, and may take the dog with me, and just take my time. And we go through thoughts of when I went to college there, and what this place has meant to me, and the friendships that have come along with it. But we will be back on Wednesday with another Seminole Sidelines. We'll talk more about the portal, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot going on there in the next couple of days, both with potential portal prospects entertaining Florida State as the place to finish their career, or with players entertaining other universities to move on from Florida State. But we appreciate you joining Seminole Sidelines. And if you have not subscribed to our Osceola YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button before you leave, and a notification button, so that you will get notifications when we're doing one of these shows live or taped. Right now, our schedule is every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, live at 3:00 on Osceola YouTube. And then, of course, if we tape them, you'll get a notification of that as well. And, of course, please go check out all our portal coverage and Bob's article on Charlie Ward taking over at FAMU at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. But we'll be back on Wednesday. Appreciate you joining in, and everybody stay strong. FSU strong. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.